Jessica Halford adjusted her blazer as she walked through the courthouse corridors. She was young, ambitious, and her career was on a sharp upward trajectory. That day, she would be meeting a client who might present the greatest challenge of her life. Thomas Hargrove, a real estate tycoon, had been accused of murdering a federal employee involved in a corruption investigation. Hargrove appeared calm in their first meeting, an imposing but courteous figure. He denied any involvement in the crime, claiming he was the target of a conspiracy due to his political connections. The prosecutor, however, was convinced of his guilt, and there was enough evidence to bring the case to trial. Hargrove's car had been seen near the crime scene, and a strand of his hair had been found at the site. As they talked, Hargrove made an enigmatic remark to Jessica: "Sometimes, the ones who scream the loudest for justice are the ones with the most to hide." It struck a chord with Jessica, but she remained focused. The case seemed relatively straightforward. She believed she could discredit the evidence as circumstantial. While reviewing the case documents that night, a detail in a witness's testimony caught her attention. Someone had mentioned that the lead investigator, Agent Thomas Morton, had been near the crime scene shortly before the body was found, something that had not been noted in the official reports. Jessica made a mental note. Was it just a procedural error, or was there something deeper at play? In the days that followed, Jessica began investigating Agent Morton's presence at the crime scene. She arranged a meeting with him under the guise of an informal chat. Morton was a stern, middle-aged man with a meticulous demeanor and a long career in the FBI. When questioned, he confirmed he had been near the location but claimed it was just a coincidence, as he was working on another investigation in the area. Morton's behavior seemed evasive. Jessica felt there was more to the story than he was willing to admit. She decided to informally dig into Morton's past, but found few relevant records. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was dealing with a larger conspiracy than she had initially thought. Meanwhile, the prosecutor added new evidence to the case, an anonymous recording of a conversation in which Hargrove discussed shady dealings with politicians. This seemed to further undermine Hargrove's defense, linking him to the government corruption scheme the prosecutor was so adamant about. Jessica felt the pressure mounting. To make matters worse, a series of mysterious messages began appearing on her phone, warning her to drop the case if she wanted to stay alive. "You don't know what you're getting into," the latest one read. That night, Hargrove called her. His voice was cold and calculated. "You have to understand, Jessica, this case is bigger than you can imagine. Don't trust anyone, not even those who seem to be on your side." Jessica hung up the phone, feeling isolated and uncertain. Was Hargrove truly innocent, or had he been manipulating her all along? And what about Agent Morton? Why did it seem like he was involved in a way no one else could see? Something wasn't right, and the answers Jessica sought seemed buried in a web of political secrets and personal betrayals. The danger surrounding her escalated. The next morning, she found her car vandalized, tires slashed, windows shattered, and a note on the dashboard: "Final warning." Struggling to remain calm, she continued her investigation, convinced she was getting closer to uncovering something far bigger than just a murder. Determined to confront the truth, Jessica stumbled upon an unexpected lead. The private investigator that Hargrove's office had hired to assist in his defense had mysteriously disappeared 2 weeks before she took the case. Hargrove had never mentioned this to her. It only deepened her intrigue. Jessica decided to confront Hargrove about the missing investigator. His reaction was alarming. He remained silent for a few moments before muttering, "Some questions are dangerous, Jessica. You're playing with people who have nothing to lose." His silence spoke louder than his words. Hargrove knew something, and he was hiding it. That night, while digging through old FBI files, Jessica uncovered something shocking. Agent Morton's name appeared repeatedly in investigations linked to the government, but always in cases that were mysteriously shelved. It seemed he operated in the shadows, covering for powerful figures who had secrets to protect. Jessica went to Agent Morton's office without warning, confronting him with the information she had uncovered. He denied everything, but his demeanor had changed. When she pressed further, mentioning the private investigator's disappearance, Morton gave a cold smile. "Do you really think you understand the game you're playing?" That phrase echoed in Jessica's mind. Something dark was unfolding, and she now knew she was at the center of a much more complex plot. Suddenly, the death of the government employee seemed like just the tip of the iceberg. The next day, the prosecutor presented new evidence: Hargrove's fingerprints on the safe from which confidential documents had gone missing. Now, he wasn't just a murder suspect, but also accused of espionage. Jessica knew this evidence had been planted, but by whom? Time was running out, and Jessica felt that every step she took brought her closer to danger, and farther from the truth. She had barely slept in the past few nights. The weight of the conspiracy surrounding her was crushing, and she no longer knew who to trust. Hargrove remained an enigma, becoming more evasive with each passing day. Now, with the espionage charges, Hargrove seemed more guilty than ever. Still, Jessica couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, something out of place, something no one else was seeing. At the preliminary hearing, the prosecutor gave a devastating presentation, linking Hargrove to the murder and the sale of confidential government information. It was a media spectacle. The journalists loved it. The cameras were focused on the courtroom, and the pressure for Hargrove to be convicted was growing. However, during the cross-examination of one of the witnesses, Jessica noticed a contradiction. The security guard who claimed to have seen Hargrove near the safe mentioned a different date than the one recorded in the case documents. The prosecutor ignored it, but Jessica didn't. Later, she reviewed the footage and noticed a pattern. The timeline of evidence seemed carefully constructed to incriminate Hargrove without question, but the detail in the guard's testimony pointed to clear manipulation. Someone was fabricating evidence. Was it Morton? Or someone even more powerful who could have hired Morton? Following the new lead, she became determined to uncover who was falsifying the facts. This led her to a high-ranking government official, someone who, according to the records, should have had no involvement in the case. Jessica confronted him discreetly, and after much insistence, he let something slip. "You're stirring the wrong nest, Miss Halford. This case is already decided. Those who hold the power don't leave traces." That confirmed her suspicions. Hargrove was being used as a scapegoat. But why? And by whom? That night, as Jessica drove home, she realized she was being followed. She turned into an alley, trying to shake off the car tailing her, but was cornered. Two men got out and warned her, "You've gone too far, Halford. Drop the case, or you'll be next." They smashed her phone on the ground and disappeared into the darkness. Jessica was afraid, but that only made her more determined. Hargrove was being sacrificed for something far bigger than murder, corruption, or espionage. She now needed to uncover the true game being played. She felt trapped in a maze with no way out. The deeper she dug, the more she became entangled in a web of lies and threats. After being followed and intimidated, she knew her life was in danger, but quitting wasn't an option. Determined to find the truth, Jessica decided to investigate Hargrove's past on her own. She knew he was hiding something, and now it was crucial to uncover what. On a cold night, while combing through old files at the office, she found a lead that left her stunned. Years earlier, Hargrove had owned a shell company that had been quickly dissolved. This company was tied to shady contracts with the Department of Defense. Leaked documents suggested that Hargrove had been involved in highly classified government projects. This could explain the involvement of Agent Morton and the massive effort to frame Hargrove. He knew secrets that could bring down the powerful. Feeling surrounded, Jessica confronted Hargrove directly. She pressed him about the company and the suspicious contracts with the Department of Defense. For the first time, Hargrove's composure cracked. His eyes narrowed, and he let out a deep sigh. "I worked for them. I knew too much, Jessica. Those contracts weren't what they seemed. The government, they couldn't let me walk away unscathed. And now, they're trying to destroy me so everything disappears with me." Jessica stepped back, feeling the weight of his words. Hargrove wasn't just a corrupt businessman involved in espionage, he knew government secrets involving the illicit use of funds and operations that should never have seen the light of day. The government was willing to eliminate him to avoid a scandal. Before she could fully process this revelation, an unexpected ally appeared. An old colleague of Jessica's, now working at a major law firm, revealed that she had been approached to take on Hargrove's case, and had turned it down. According to her, the case had first been offered to another attorney, who mysteriously disappeared weeks before. The web of conspiracy was tightening, and Jessica knew that if she continued, she would be on her own. Then the betrayal came swiftly. While reviewing her confidential emails, Jessica discovered that someone on her own team had been feeding information to the prosecutor. Now, she suspected everyone. One of her closest allies could be working against her. With few options left, Jessica decided to risk everything and go straight to the heart of the conspiracy, confronting her own demons. Feeling the walls closing in, she arrived at her office at dawn, determined to confront the person sabotaging her defense. As she sifted through papers, reorganizing evidence and retracing her steps, an anonymous phone call broke the silence. "They know you're close. Get off the case now, or it'll be too late," warned a muffled male voice before abruptly hanging up. Jessica knew she had to act fast. Putting the pieces of the puzzle together, she decided to confront Paulette, her assistant, who had privileged access to all the case details. Paulette had always been trustworthy, but something in her recent behavior, a subtle nervousness, an unusual hesitation, had caught Jessica's attention. When Jessica questioned her, the tension in the air was palpable. Paulette tried to play it off, but soon tears began to fall. I didn't have a choice, she admitted, breaking down under the pressure. They threatened my family, Jessica. I never wanted to hurt you, but they've been watching us the whole time. Paulette confessed that she had been feeding information to Agent Morton from the very beginning. Morton had been pulling strings behind the scenes, but there was something deeper that even Paulette couldn't fully comprehend. With the betrayal exposed, Jessica knew she had no time to waste. Hargrove was caught in a scheme far bigger than anyone could have imagined. Morton and his accomplices weren't just fabricating evidence, they were eliminating anyone who got too close to uncovering the secrets behind government contracts tied to an unbelievable network of power and corruption. Determined to confront Morton directly, Jessica set a trap. Using Paulette's fear and the knowledge she had gathered, she crafted a plan. She sent encrypted messages to Morton, hinting that she had irrefutable proof of his involvement, along with other high-ranking officials. When they met in an abandoned parking lot, Morton was alone, but the tension was suffocating. He smiled, exuding confidence as she stood her ground. "You think you can beat me, Jessica? What you have is nothing but crumbs. We are the system. You won't live to tell this story." Jessica, however, had secretly recorded the entire conversation. It was her only way out, using Morton's own words against him. But then, Morton dropped a bombshell. "You think this is about Hargrove? He's just a distraction. The real target has always been you." Jessica was paralyzed. "What does he mean, it was always me?" she thought, her mind racing. Morton's words echoed in Jessica's mind, "The real target has always been you." She stood still, trying to make sense of what he meant. It didn't add up. She was just a lawyer who had stumbled upon this case by chance. Or had she? With a dark smile, Morton continued, "You've always been the perfect pawn. From the very beginning, this whole scheme was designed to bring you right here, where we are now. Don't you see, Jessica? Your involvement with Hargrove, your meteoric rise in your career, none of it was coincidence. We control everything. And now, you're exactly where we wanted you." Jessica's mind spun as she replayed the last few years of her life, her sudden success, the invitations to high-profile cases, the unexpected connection to Hargrove. Could it all have been orchestrated from the start? She started recalling subtle moments, encounters that seemed insignificant at the time but now took on new meaning. She had been carefully manipulated by a powerful group, groomed to be a scapegoat in a conspiracy far larger than she could have imagined. "But why?" she asked, her voice trembling with shock and anger. "Why me?" Morton stepped closer, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "Your father." Jessica felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. "My father? He died years ago. This makes no sense." Morton chuckled darkly. "That's what you've always believed, isn't it? The truth is, he didn't die in a car accident. He was an informant. Your father worked for us, infiltrating defense contracts, but he knew too much. When they tried to silence him, he disappeared, but not without leaving traces behind. Damning documents, proof that's still hidden. And the key to finding all of it lies with you, Jessica. He hid it in you, in your past. And now, we need that information." Jessica could barely breathe. Her father's disappearance had always haunted her, but she'd accepted the official narrative. Now, everything was unraveling. She wasn't just a lawyer, she was at the center of an old, dark conspiracy involving government corruption and secrets buried for decades. Morton continued, "You have something you don't even know you possess. And we're going to find it, no matter what it takes." Before Jessica could react, she heard footsteps behind her. Armed men appeared, ready to take her. But then, suddenly, gunshots rang out through the parking lot. In a blur, Hargrove appeared, taking out Morton's men with unexpected precision. He rushed to Jessica, pulling her toward a car. "Now you understand, don't you? This was never about me. I've been trying to protect you. Your father and I, we worked together." In a state of shock, Jessica got into the car. Everything she thought she knew was in ruins. The man she once believed guilty had, in fact, been on her side all along. And the grand conspiracy she had been trying to unravel was actually about her own history, her own past. As the car sped through the empty streets, Jessica looked at Hargrove. "What do we do now?" He looked back at her, his expression grim. "Now, we find the truth. And then, we destroy them all." The plot was far from over, and Jessica knew her life would never be the same. But for the first time, she had clarity about who her real enemy was, and what was truly at stake. Do you think you can always tell who's on your side? What if the truths we uncover are just the surface layers of something much deeper? Jessica moved on, but she paid a heavy price. What would you do in her place? Would you give up or keep going until the end, even knowing you could lose everything? Sometimes, the search for justice changes people, and not always for the better. What would you do if you were her? And, in the end, how much would you trust yourself? How do you think the story should end? Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to explore more dilemmas like this.